Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Freely Nourished, the podcast that empowers you to break the cycle of dieting by teaching you to nourish your body well. I am your host, registered dietitian Erin Casey, and I am the owner of New You Nutrition Counseling, where we do exactly what I just said. We empower you to break the cycle of dieting, teach you how to nourish your body well, and get you to that healthy, happy place with food in your body that you can sustain and live the rest of your life. Um, I have a couple of quick kind of housekeeping announcements. We will be working through and launching a couple of new courses to start in the fall. So it is currently August as I am recording. This is the very first week of August. So by the time you hear this, those courses may have already launched, but we are actually soliciting listener feedback. So we would love to hear from you if you want to type a comment. Down below of kind of types of information you are interested in. Generally, our courses last anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. They go at your own pace. You get lots of downloadable information and goodies. You also get a free counseling session with me. It is just a one-off. So if you want to do anything beyond that, it takes some planning, and then there will be a cost associated with that. But really, what we're wanting to know is just kind of what types of topics are you interested in learning more about? What parts of either diet culture or nutrition are you trying to unpack and understand? Even if you don't think that it's super relevant, it may be. It may kind of be that combined with comments we get from other people. It may be kind of something that helps us build the course that you all ultimately want. There definitely will be a course related to your body image, as well as nourishment and kind of breaking free from diet culture. That's going to be kind of a hallmark course that will launch in the fall, but we're also looking to branch out and do a couple of master classes as well. So be on the lookout for that. Again, anything you want to know nutrition wise, let us know in the comments, let us know on our social media pages. You can send us emails, direct messages, anything like that. We check anything and everything, and we are here producing this content for you. So we want to know what it is that you wanted to know more about. So that's it. That's the big announcement. And then, of course, we always have all of our meal planning courses that are still currently available for purchase. There are two. One is a master class. It's quite a bit shorter. That one is $25. It's called Healthy Eating for Busy People. It's basically for folks who are on the go. A lot of times, people who are single or don't have a family kind of benefit from this. People who have a family do. As well, but it's kind of how to plan meals when you are constantly on the go, whether you are on the go just as a single person kind of just starting your career, or if you're constantly on the go as a student, if you're constantly on the go because you have kids and like your kids are going everywhere and anywhere. That one's 1 hour. Again, stop and start at your own pace. It's only $25. It's a really, really helpful way to kind of get you some easy to use, apply right now strategies into your nutrition repertoire. The deeper dive is called Consistency Counts, and that one is more about kind of how to build healthful habits really from the ground up. So we spend a little bit more time in that one talking about what healthy eating actually looks like, and what nutritional balance actually looks like, because there's frankly a lot of lies out there, and there's a lot of truths that are honestly overcomplicated. So to that end, we kind of decomplicate it, right? We make it very simple. We kind of set you up with how to know how much and what food groups to eat and things like that, and then we walk you through a very similar process the um, as the healthy eating for busy people of, okay, how do we apply this, right? Like, how do we make it happen in various states of life circumstance, right? So both of those are currently available, and like I said, we will be dropping a body image and diet culture course for sure. And then we're wanting to do at least one more, if not two. We can always do a series of master classes, just kind of depending on what comes out. But like I said, all of this is here for you all. So we want to make sure we're doing what you want. with that, I have just a short little ditty for you all today on something that I find myself repeatedly explaining to my patients. And whenever I have something that I find myself saying over and over and over again, seemingly on every call I have all week, I think that, you know what, that might be a really good thing to put on the podcast because it's clearly something that a lot of people struggle with. And it's something that, it resonates with a lot of people. And that is this idea that your hunger cues are kind of the end all be all determinant of whether or not you should eat. And unfortunately, that is not that simple, right? Nothing on our bodies is as simple as it should be. And one of the unfortunate side effects of dieting, whether it's chronic dieting, whether this is like the first diet you've ever tried, or you've been dieting for decades, is that it warps your hunger and satiety cues, right? And if you are brand new to this podcast and you've never heard me talk about anything like this before, first of all, I'm an anti-diet dietitian. So even though the word diet is in my title, I don't believe in diets. I don't believe in prescribing anything that has a name to it. There's lots of reasons why that is. You can go back into older episodes to hear me unpack a lot of that, but really and truly, my belief is that they're the only sustainable way to eat healthfully and kind of live your life is to find a pattern that works for you. And that pattern that works for you likely will not work for everybody else. It may work for someone else, but it's not going to work there's not going to ever be a one size fits all diet that works for people. And generally speaking, diets that have names, so things like keto, intermittent fasting, Atkins, even Weight Watchers, things like that, generally speaking, are too extreme. They're trying to make something very black and white when it is not black and white. Nutrition is not black and white. There are 1,000 shades of gray. And ignoring those shades of gray and trying to just make things black and white really sets us up for failure for a lot of reasons. And like I said, there's old episodes galore to talk about all of that. It's all over my social media. But just in case anybody's just kind of like tuning in here, wait, dieting's a bad thing from a dietitian? Yes, that is the case, at least from this dietitian. So I don't believe in diets. I don't believe in prescribing diets, and I never will. And that said, part of the struggle in having that type of mentality, which isn't just a mentality, I mean, it's based on significant bodies of evidence, is that there is an entire $1 billion industry that is the diet industry that is pushing down on us, basically trying to silence people like myself and other practitioners who hold the same beliefs, because if we succeed, they lose money, right? So it's really hard, and a lot of us, myself included, again, if you know much about my background, I come from an eating disorder background. I struggle with an eating disorder personally. I treat lots of my patients have eating disorders, and even those who have never been diagnosed with a true eating disorder, in some way have some type of warped relationship with food. And that is what diet culture does, right? That's what that black and white thinking does. It teaches us that some things are good and some things are bad. And, we have to live by these perfect rules and these perfect standards to have the perfect body, because thin bodies are the only worthy bodies, and blah, 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 blah. The list goes on and on and on. And none of that is true. I want to be explicitly clear. Nothing that I just said is true. But that's what diet culture teaches us. And as a result, we go on these crazy diets that take away things like carbs or fats or certain types of meats or certain types of grains or certain types of fruits. Things like the blood type diet and the DNA diet. Those are kind of like the newest renditions of them, and it's scary because those things sound like they're rooted in science, but to be honest, as the person who's read the science that they're supposedly rooted in, they're not rooted in science. The science is nowhere near able to identify what your needs are different from the next person based on your genetics or your blood type. There's nowhere near enough evidence to make those kinds of recommendations. So basically what has happened is the diet industry has just capitalized on those buzzwords and kind of preached honestly nonsense. But regardless of whatever type of diet you're on, right, it involves some form of restriction, right? It's some foods are kind of holy foods that you eat lots of, and then some foods are bad foods that you eat very little of. Whatever diet you're on will change, what's in those two categories, but that's in essence what a diet is, right? It's like you eat some foods and you don't eat other foods. even if you are just on like a calorie deficit plan, which is what I do practice calorie deficits. Along with a few other kind of basic nutrition parameters, which again, you can find all of that certainly in the courses I mentioned, but also in some of my earlier episodes. But if you have been under eating too significantly, like if you have just been eating as little as possible, which again, that's what diet culture teaches us. It's a lie, but diet culture teaches us that the less you eat, the skinnier you will be. And the more you eat, the fatter you will be. And what diet, because according to diet culture, skinny bodies are the only worthy bodies. We are taught from a very young age to eat less and less and less, right? It's particularly prevalent in people who are socialized as girls or women, but it spans everywhere, right? Certainly in the trans community, body dysmorphia is very common, and then even in people who identify and are socialized as men, it's not always so much thin, but definitely muscular. There's definitely elements of that as well, but again, it's a lie. But thin bodies are the goal, and the less you eat, the more likely you are to attain that goal. Now, I want to be explicitly clear that that is not true. There's really not the correlation that people think there is regarding how much you eat and where your weight is. There's a lot of other factors that affect your weight, things like activity level, genetics, stress, other illnesses, things like that are definitely going to impact your weight. But even when it comes to just how much you eat, it's really more of a spectrum than it is, or really more of like a rainbow, I would say, than a line. So there's going to be kind of like an upward trend that like once you eat to a certain point, your body's going to maintain or gain. Your body's going to maintain, I'm sorry. But then once you go past that point, yeah, then you might start to gain. Unfortunately, what most of us have done, and this goes back to I did a whole series on BMR, and I will link that episode down below too. So basically what we talk about is when we do these yo-yo type of diets, we're also kind of yo-yoing our metabolism. So when we eat too little, that teaches our body that we have to conserve energy, right? That energy or food is scarce. So, and as humans, we all evolved in times of scarcity. The reason why we are here today is because our ancestors evolved to survive famines, right? So they evolved storage mechanisms, conservation mechanisms within their own metabolisms to survive times when food was quite frankly just not available. That is not a problem many humans face at this time. Unfortunately, still more humans than should, especially in the Western world, do suffer from hunger, but a lot of us don't. But our bodies are still capable of conserving resources when we are underfeeding them, even if that underfeeding is intentional, right? Your body doesn't know it's intentional or not. It just knows that it's not getting enough food, and it has evolved and survived over millennia because it had those conservation resources. So it's worked really, really well from millennia up until this point. It has been honestly probably less than 100 years to where access to food reliably has been more common than not. So I would say even in like, the 1920s, 1930s, there were a lot of people out there who truly did not have regular sources of food. And it probably wasn't even until closer, probably the 1950s, after some of the welfare programs were established in World War II, that we all really kind of had readily access to food. Europe, I would say that they probably had better access a couple of decades before most Americans did. And then the war, of course, mess with everything. So anyway, point is that sometimes when you eat less, your body actually starts to conserve resources. And I talked a whole other episode about that's called your BMR, and how that BMR can go up and down depending on how much food you have available on a regular basis. Similar to that, your body can upregulate and downregulate hunger signals. So very often what I hear from folks is, 9 times out of 10, somebody comes into my office wanting to lose weight. 9 times out of 10, I'm actually telling them they have to eat more. Honestly, it's probably closer to 10 times out of 10. I don't know that I've had a single patient in the last 3 years who have said, you really need to cut back your intake. 9 times out of 10, I'm telling them you need to eat more. And again, if you go back into that BMR website or episode, that it'll tell you all the reasons why that is. But the common response I get is, well, I'm just not hungry. I that's great that you're telling me to eat more, but I've been skipping breakfast for 20 years. I'm not hungry in the morning anymore. Or I've been skipping lunch for 20 years. I'm not hungry in the morning anymore. Sometimes that is paired with I'm not hungry all day, and then when I get home I am starving, or after dinner I can't seem to stay out of the snack cabinet. And the reason is that you have taught your body that food is not available throughout the day, whether that is by intentional dieting, by stress related to your job, by lack of free time related to your job and not being able to take those breaks, having busy mornings, you've got to get yourself together, the kids together, whatever. But basically, you have taught your body that from whatever time in the morning until dinner time at night, food is not readily available. So why would it create a hunger signal that is just going to make you uncomfortable, that is just going to waste valuable peptides that it could use to put towards something else, to send a hunger signal that you are going to ignore, especially if it's been decades that this has been happening? Why would your body do that? It doesn't. It adapts. So it has learned not to bother being hungry, but it still needs nutrition. So that's where a lot of times that overeating at night can come into play. Even if you are eating during the day, but I hear this a lot too, is that, well, I'm really good during the workday, right? I'm really good for breakfast. I'm really good for lunch. But then when I get home, the wheels just come off the wagon. I just can't seem to get full. It's because you didn't eat enough earlier in the day, even though you may have felt full and satisfied with the meals that you did eat. The reason why you're feeling so hungry and so, insatiable at night is because you didn't eat enough during the day. And the reason why you didn't may be intentional restriction, but it also may be that, again, you've trained your body. You've trained your body that this is all we get during the day, but the real food is available at night, right? So I think it's really important to recognize that our hunger and fullness cues adapt based on what we provide our bodies with. And they are not always a reliable measure of whether or not our body is truly hungry. And what I will tell, very often I have people use a strategy of setting alarms. So, for example, if they are somebody who, maybe they struggle to get something out in the morning, we'll kind of talk through some quick breakfast options. Maybe they just kind of tend to work all day and kind of lose track of time and don't eat lunch. I'll have them set an alarm for lunch. Or maybe there's somebody who like just doesn't feel great first thing in the morning, like they just can't handle food very first thing. And there's a lot of people out there like that. There's a lot of people who very genuinely, even if they are willing to eat food, like it just doesn't sit right on their stomach. Their body truly needs an hour or two to wake up. But sometimes by that point, they've already gotten to work or whatever they're doing, and they kind of just lose track of time until lunchtime or even later. So again, setting alarms is a very common strategy that I use for folks. And depending on you, your personal situation, and your body when those times are, is something we kind of discuss. But basically you set regular intervals and you eat regardless of whether you're hungry or not. And people will be amazed that all of a sudden they don't need the alarms anymore. Their body is ready to cue hunger at 10 a.m. It's ready to cue lunch at 1 p.m. or 12 p.m. or whatever time. And it's very readily adapts right back. And it's just kind of like, wow, I didn't realize that I actually needed this much food. And it's, again, your body's trying to protect you. It's not going to send hunger signals when it knows they're going to be ignored. But when you compile that with diet culture, right, that tells us the less we eat, the better, right, then all of a sudden this not being hungry becomes a good thing. It becomes your best weapon. You're like, oh, I don't have to eat. that makes me superior in some way, or that means I might lose weight in some way. That's great. I'm going to do whatever I can to keep this, non-hunger situation going on here. And that's when the cycle starts to spiral, because that is disordered. That is a disordered relationship with food. It is a disordered relationship with your body, is to where you think you can train your body to need less food. You cannot. Your body needs the amount of energy it needs, and it probably needs more than you're feeding it. Like I said, 9 out of 10 times, arguably closer to 10 out of 10 times, people who come through my doors need significantly more food than they are giving their bodies. And I also have another podcast episode, I'll link it below too, that talks about how to identify how many calories and what macros and stuff like that you need. But, just for the sake of this topic, your hunger cues may not be as accurate as you think they are. And the fact that you have been ignoring them for such a long portion of your day, no wonder you're so hungry at night. You're not getting any food for a huge part of your day, right? So no wonder you're so hungry and seemingly insatiable at night. The other thing our hunger cues cannot tell us is what our body needs. So even if our hunger cues work properly, they can't always tell us what it is, and from a nutrient standpoint, that our body needs. It knows that, well, we need something, right? Either my stomach's empty, I need carbs, I need protein, I need this, that. But it can't really tell you, down to the micronutrient, what's actually missing. So a lot of times, and this happens especially in people who do like an extremely low carb diet, or things like that, or really kind of in some way have convinced themselves that carbs are bad or cause weight gain. Again, I'll be explicitly clear that that is not true. I have lots of other episodes talking about that. But for the sake of this one, if you are restricting a particular food group, because even if it's just like a subtle message, if you're somebody who thinks that a salad is a better lunch choice than a sandwich, you might be restricting carbs more than you think. If you think that egg bites are a better breakfast option than a bagel, you might want to think about your relationship with carbs, because frankly, you need both of those things. You need the protein from the eggs, but you also need the bagel. You need the veggies from the salad, but you also need the carbs and the protein from the sandwich. So, again, things are not that black and white, and that balance is going to look slightly different for everybody, but there should be a balance. And carbs, which are kind of the main target of a lot of this diet culture propaganda at this time anyway, a lot of those carbs are kind of like the demonized food of the decade, so to speak. And if you don't eat them throughout the day, your body's going to kind of panic at night and be like, hey, we didn't get much in the way of carbs today, and like sun's going down, we know that much, and like we go to bed pretty well after the sun goes down, so we got to get some carbs or something in here, right? And you start to get those cravings, those seemingly insatiable cravings. And a lot of times, anytime people have like really extreme cravings or just kind of have this like snack urge at night, my first question is, what is happening earlier in the day? Are you eating balanced meals? Are you getting carbs? Are you getting vegetables? Are you getting fruits? Because all of those things really help create that nutrient balance. And that nutrient balance is what creates satiety. It's not just a feeling of fullness. You can fill your belly to where it's like, yeah, I'm physically full, but are you satiated? Is your body satisfied? That's where dietary balance comes in and is so important. And to help you with this, I have a food group tracker that will be linked below. And it is basically, it's nothing fancy. It is just a little table that has the days of the week on the top and the food groups on the left-hand side. And basically all you do is every time you eat, so like let's say for breakfast you had a hard boiled egg, a yogurt, and some fruit, right? So that would be a protein source, a dairy source, and a fruit. So you would just put a checkbox in on Monday morning for a fruit, a dairy, and a protein. And basically, you do that for all of your meals for a week. And basically, what you will do is identify your gaps. And what those gaps tell you is, in a nutshell, where you maybe have some holes in your nutrition. Correcting those holes and kind of balancing out the gaps, so to speak, helps immensely to reduce those cravings. And again, that's something that I do one-on-one with my patients all the time. And kind of what that looks like, what the solution will look like is going to be a little different for everybody, because your lifestyle is different, your preferences are different, your job is different, whatever. But the goal is that you're kind of getting a more complete, balanced look at nutrition, and by doing so, your body's going to be less inclined to kind of give those starvation signals, where it's not just I'm hungry, it's that I need something and I can't quite put my finger on it. There is also a huge body of intuitive eating work that speaks to that as well. A wonderful resource is the Intuitive Eating Workbook. It is by Evelyn Triboli and Elise Reich. You can buy it on Amazon. I think it's something like $20. It's fairly cheap. And they also have a whole book on intuitive eating as well. I am not a licensed intuitive eating counselor. However, the principles of intuitive eating can really kind of help to bring back some of that being in tune with your body and what it's actually telling you. That said, sometimes, like I said, I have people who their body just stopped creating hunger signals because they stopped eating food. So sometimes we have to kind of force correct that as well. So again, lots of resources for you all. But take homes from today's episode is that just because you're not hungry doesn't mean, or just because you don't feel hungry doesn't mean that your body doesn't need nutrients, doesn't mean that your body doesn't need to be nourished. It may have just stopped telling you because it felt like you weren't going to listen. And to that same end, dietary balance and eating enough early in the day is likely the solution to any kind of like snacking or insatiable needs later on in the day. So, with that, I will leave you. Again, please leave us comments and suggestions for courses or master classes you would like to see. Even just topics you want to see talked about. We can also make a podcast episode about it, depending on what it is. But we also would welcome any suggestions you all have for those deep dives. And then, like I said, I will link the BMR and the how to tell your calorie and nutrition needs below, as well as give you all that little free download for the food group tracker. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will talk to you next time.